Welcome to the Individuated Bookshelf, a Sophia Psychos podcast for readers who know that the right book at the right moment can change a life. I'm your host, Bea Gonzalez. Through Jungian psychology, mythology, philosophy, and the Western esoteric traditions, I explore the texts and ideas that shape the inner world. This is a space for those who read, not just for information, but for transformation. When I first drew up the plan for the new incarnation of this podcast, I always came back to James Hollis as the writer I would feature most prominently. I post quotes from many authors on my Sophia Psychos social media pages, but his quotes consistently get the most response, and for good reason. He challenges you by inviting you to ask yourself some hard questions. It was 2 decades ago that I first picked up one of his books, a slim volume published by Inner City Books, and it so captivated me that I became an Inner City Books addict. I now own close to 100 of their publications. In 2010, I invited James Hollis to come to Toronto to give a talk to 200 people at the University of Toronto, and then to spend a full day with members of my group, sharing his wisdom. Spending time with this wise and gentle man was an honor. He is humble, considerate of others, and perceptive beyond measure. The members of my group joked that we were like groupies meeting a rock star, one who had generously offered his time and full attention to us. This podcast is not only about the books we read, but about how they impact the reader. Today, I've invited Jeff Miller, someone who has been a friend for a long time, someone with whom I've had many conversations over the years that have left me feeling intellectually nourished. He once joked about my making him sleep under the sink in my room at the London residence where I lived during grad school when he came to visit. But what I remember is that he made the effort to travel there and to keep our friendship alive. I recently reconnected with him and was delighted when he agreed to join me for this conversation and hopefully several more. In this episode, he shares how Hollis helped him ask very different questions about his own life. So welcome, Jeff, to the Individuated Bookshelf. How are you?
I'm great, Bea. I'm happy to be here and pleased that you invited me to speak with you today.
Okay, so tell me first a little bit about yourself.
My name is Jeff Miller, and I am an actor. I have been an actor since I got interested in it back when I was like 17 years old. I went to school for it, and I've been a professional actor since I was about 25. I'm 62 now. And of course, being an actor in Canada, I've worked in Canada, I've worked in the United States, but I work primarily in theater. I've done a bit of film and television, but because the life of an actor is what it is in Canada, I have also done other jobs, many other jobs, including teaching. I've been teaching at Centennial College in the theater performance program for just about 9 years now. And so that has allowed me some flexibility as far as being able to take some time off and go to work here or do this play or that play and then go back to teaching. That has been my life primarily for the last 40, 50 years.
So we are going to speak today about one of my favorites, James Hollis. And before we get into that, maybe better for you to talk about how you found James Hollis and what your experience of his work has been for you.
The only reason I found James Hollis was because of somebody named Bea Gonzalez. You ever heard of her? We should let listeners know too. Bea and I have been friends since we were about 17 years old. Yeah. And Bea has been was a large presence in my life earlier on. And you introduced me to somebody named James Hollis, who was a Jungian psychoanalyst who was doing a lot of writing. And at a certain point in my life, I would say as I approached or just about landed in middle age, you started to hear some things, I think, come out of my mouth that led you to believe that perhaps I might be helped by reading some James Hollis. I think you are the type of person who often recommends books and literature and writing as you listen to your friends and colleagues talk about what they're interested in. Anyway, I read Hollis, and I read a book called Finding Meaning in the Second Half of Life. And it was a revelation for me. I was not in the habit of reading self-help books. I tended to be cynical about the whole genre. I couldn't stand being in the bookstore and walking through the self-help section and seeing 50 ways to influence people, a quick way to a huge fortune in life, smile more. All that stuff I found really superficial and dull, and I wouldn't read it. I read Hollis, and I was knocked off my balance. I could not believe how much I got from the introduction, from the first 4 pages of that book. And back then I read actual physical books, and I didn't want to muddy the book by highlighting. So I would write stuff down, and I was writing pads and pads of stuff. Anyway, he really was a huge and positive input for me when I was introduced to him.
I just want to point out, self-help, I have the same view of self-help that you do. I can't stand the 10 steps to this and the 10 steps to that. He also has noted that he hates that approach as well, because life is a lot more complicated. I don't know if he's put in the self-help section. I'd be surprised and also dismayed. But I think the reason you might, just from knowing you for so long, that you might have responded so well to Hollis is that you are quite literate. You love literature. He was an English lit professor. That's how he started out before he went into Jungian analysis, when he himself also had a breakdown in his middle age period. And so one of the things I really appreciate about him, not to be a snob, but my background academically is partially in literature, is how many references he often has to works that gets the point across in a way that maybe sometimes other things don't. That's number one. Number two, he recreates clinical experiences he's had where he explains things and how they work. And by the way, let me tell you, because this is really important, I had not spoken to you for several years before I wildly, in the middle of California, sitting with my very young children, I thought I have to send Jeff this book recommendation. And I actually thought you wouldn't read it. But I thought, okay, I'm going to try it anyway. And to this day, I do not understand why I felt the need to do that, but I did. Now, you're right. I go around recommending books to everybody. That's what I do on social media as well. That's my big passion in life, for reading books and then recommending them. The thing I really appreciate about Hollis is his insistence that we take responsibility for everything in life, right? And I'm going to actually qualify this before I bring you in. Pema Chodron, who's a teacher I really like, a Buddhist teacher, was just interviewed at the age of 89 by Ezra Klein. And she pointed out the thing that sometimes I get a response on social media about Hollis. If you're talking to an abused person, can you really say to them, you mustn't take responsibility for your life? I think Pema Chodron answered this beautifully. She said she had a reader write to her and say, oh, thank you, I'm in a very abusive relationship, and you told me to feel my feelings, and I hear your talk, and now I can deal with it better. And she immediately responded and said, no, you are to leave that relationship immediately. The first act we all do is protect ourselves, boundary ourselves against abuse, against anything that is transgressing our boundaries. And then you can feel your feelings and do the rest of it. And I think Hollis would say the same thing. So taking responsibility, and I want to put that in here because I think that's one of the criticisms. If you say everything is me and everything I'm responsible for, then you may behave in a way that says everything that happens to me, that is done to me, is acceptable, and it's not. I think both Pema Chodron and Hollis would coincide in the idea that the only thing you have is, first you protect yourself, and those are the layers. Secondly, the response to what is happening to you. We've all had maybe problematic parents, but if the response is always to blame the parent and not to look beyond that, and that's not condoning the behavior, that's just looking beyond that, to understand how that landed you where you are, and maybe understand your patterns because of that, then you're not doing the work that you need to do. Is this how you understand it as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was going to touch on that point as well. One of the first things I took from Hollis's writing was his idea that I am responsible for my own life. And again, that can be misinterpreted as somehow then other people, other forces can't be negative or influence us negatively. That's not what it's about. But I was reaching a point in my life where I didn't understand why the world, my career, relationships, my parents weren't taking care of me, weren't providing the next step clearly and abundantly. I very much reached middle age thinking that I was going to be taken care of, that other things, people, boyfriends, parents, family, when I was in a position of trouble, were going to step in and make things better. That was a pattern that had established itself in the first half of my life. But Hollis was the first author that I read, writer that I read that said, you know what, you're on your own, kid. you have to grow up. Oversimplifying here and paraphrasing, but that's what I took from it. You have to start to take accountability. You have to realize that no one is coming to rescue you, Jeff. No one. Yeah. Now, that's not to say things will go well, and you'll get great opportunities. You might meet a great person, and your parents continue to be supportive, but they're not here to live your life. And it took me a long time to realize that. Let me just circle back just really briefly, because when I was preparing to have this discussion with you, Bea, and I think it's one of the most telling pieces out of that introduction of Hollis's book, that Finding Meaning in the Second Half of Life. And I just wanted to throw this out here because we were talking about how-to books and self-help books and how he gets some pushback. But he says in his introduction to that book, this book is not a typical how-to book. My chief desire is to stir thought, trouble sleep, and provide some wider perspective. It will not tell you how to find God, meet the perfect mate, or win friends and influence people. There you have it right there. And what a bold and provocative thing for someone to put in the first pages of a book like this. My chief desire is to stir thought and trouble sleep. Yes. Huh? What? So, hold on. Trouble sleep. What does that mean? It means you're going to have to start being more conscious. You're going to have to start thinking about something other than what's right in front of you, in terms of understanding what's going on underneath, understanding all these forces. And I know there's much more to discuss there, but I found that absolutely brilliant. Brilliant. So if you're looking for easy answers here, don't read Hollis. They're not there.
No, but if you're looking to be an adult, if you're looking to live, then you'd read Hollis. And I think that's what he is trying to tell you, and he won't apologize for it. So one of the pushbacks I get on Hollis from time to time when I quote him is that he's too depressing. And it's, you know what? No, he is rooted in life and reality. And what he's telling you is that there is nothing that's going to come here, like you say, and save you. And if you're looking for a savior, then you're going to have to go elsewhere. And you're right. Where do you hear this type of adult conversation? Nowhere, right? Because his other argument is our society puts us to sleep with every soporific available, from mass media to whatever. And waking up is hard. It's a lot easier to drug yourself up with whatever you're doing, which we all do. And drugging up, by the way, isn't just unconsciousness, just allowing unconsciousness to take over, so you don't have to take the responsibility to take the step, right? I am troubled by the infantile culture we live in. I think I've always been, but as I got older, it started really bothering me. Robert Bly, who I really adore as well, wrote a book called The Sibling Society, where he talks about how we're all teenagers because of the kind of economic system we belong to and the emphasis on ego gratification. We're supposed to remain teenagers, so we keep buying and drugging ourselves up. And you're seeing this right now in Instagram culture. You're seeing it everywhere with some very horrific results. So I'm so glad you brought that up, but it is the biggest pushback you will get on Hollis. He is too depressing.
And remember what Hollis repeats over and over again in his writing. And it's a brilliant synopsis, short synopsis. He's looking to help us. He's looking to help us live a life of meaning, not happiness. Yes. And it's so simple and it's so few words, but there it is right there. That this culture we have, where we all are walking around wondering why the hell we're not more happy. Yeah. Why is there discontent? Why is there this uneasiness in everyone? And the older you get as Bea, the more you understand that everyone is walking around with this discontent, uneasiness, weird, strange, that somehow what I'm presenting to the outside world isn't matching what I'm feeling inside. Yeah. And Hollis says over and over, and I've read a lot of his books, but over and over again, Jeff, let's talk about a life of meaning, not whether you're happy from this moment to that moment. And a life of meaning is a life of richness. And a life of meaning means a lot of shit, a lot of crap, a lot of doubt, a lot of sometimes trauma. Yeah. But we learn from that. Yeah. And if we don't look at that, I sent you that Marilyn Robinson quote. Yeah. We're not here to be comfortable.
Yeah.
And that is one of the most difficult things to learn as I grew older, is that life is not set up for me to just be comfortable. It's not, it doesn't work that way. It's really difficult sometimes. And it's also magnificent and brilliant a lot of the time too. But if you keep wondering why it's not magnificent and brilliant and full of joy all the time, then I will be unhappy. Then I will feel like a failure.
Yeah.
I think that's so essential.
Yeah. You know, the word happiness is one he goes on about. And I think it's much stronger in North American culture, this idea that we always have to be chasing happiness. And following that will make you completely unhappy. I was speaking to my previous guest, Sumit Anand, about how we've all got this hungry ghost inside of us. It's like we're always chasing something, and something is going to make us better, and everything is in the future. Everybody, I think, has experienced trauma. If you live long enough, you will. I think what he brings to the table is if you can make meaning, and this is taken from Jung's work, if you can make meaning of whatever trauma happened to you, then you can begin to have a different conversation with it. And that conversation may be difficult, but it will allow you to experience it in a different way. And so I think one of the things he's really valuable is when he speaks about, for example, our background with our parents and our family structures, because that's where a lot of trauma originates, right? And we're not condoning behavior. I always say, look, every generation passes on their unconsciousness to the next generation. This is why I love Aeschylus and I love the Oresteia, because it talks about who breaks the unconsciousness, and Orestes is the big hero. Classical Greek drama is just fantastic. I'm going to have you back on just to talk about stuff like that because I love it. And he refers to works like that because they're so powerful. But anyway, it takes somebody in that chain to be conscious and to say, I'm not going to blame the ancestors. I'm going to have a different conversation. And that is painful because I think it's a lot easier to blame people for whatever's happened, because then you don't have to think about it anymore. But it's also less powerful. Once you're able to say, oh, I see how this thought, this idea got passed down the line and landed where I am, you are now empowered to see it in a different way. And importantly, for people like myself who have children, not pass it on to your own children, which is about the biggest gift you can give, right? Not to pass that level of unconsciousness, which again was why I think that whole, it's not a trilogy per se, but the 3 plays that they make up the Oresteia are so powerful. So yes, this is again, but it is work. It is a lot of work because taking back those projections on people means that you have to live in a different way. And I think when people react to his negativity, that's what they're reacting to. And I find there has been a move towards making it into about victimhood as opposed to empowerment. And so it can make it very difficult to have conversations because we're kind of stuck in the idea of protect, as opposed to how can we explore this in order to have a different conversation. Does that ring true to you?
It's a little bit of a balancing act as an educator in 2026. The idea, because historically, theater training back 30, 40 years ago was highly competitive, and you got yelled at by, I know because I was a part of it as a student, you got yelled at by instructors and coaches and who said, you're not good enough. You need to pick it. You need to pick it up. You're never going to make it out there in the world. There was a real sort of sense that you had to toughen these kids up because it's such a brutally unforgiving professional world in the arts that it could be quite adversarial or aggressive. So now we can't do that anymore.
No, and that's good. We all agree that is good.
So, but you're right, Ben. The other side of it is everyone is a superstar.
Yeah.
Everyone is so beautifully talented. And oh my gosh, you're just amazing. You know, you're amazing. No, you're amazing. No, you're amazing. Right? And certainly there can be sometimes a trap for an instructor like myself to be careful, overly careful with students today, because I don't want to scare anybody. And we live in a culture, this is a much larger discussion in a 4-hour podcast, where people can feel slighted, sometimes very easily, and sometimes not necessarily accurately. That's just my opinion, right?
Yeah, no, it's true.
So it is a challenge as an educator today, because we certainly see students who are coming from a high school system that have not necessarily been challenged or pushed to really figure things out on their own.
I'm thinking more, obviously that experience would be very intense. I'm thinking also about how some ideas cannot even be talked about. And if you can't challenge ideas that should be challenging, because I think discussion, conversation allows us to distill what's important and what we can actually legitimately oppose, then you've got a very stagnant situation where we're not having conversations, which I think might have led to the kind of craziness we're seeing just rampant across all sectors. And so, but that means, yeah, you're going to have to confront some thinkers who are very problematic. But I rather talk about them than hide them underneath the table where they can come up in other groups that will interpret them in ways that are really super troubling. And so that's why I bring that up, that it is difficult. And again, we get back to what Hollis is always advocating, that first of all, it's really important to know why personally you are reacting to certain ideas. And some, of course, are offensive beyond belief. So we're not even going to go to the extremes, okay? But why does something challenge you so much? And I think what he explains so well is that can be really instructive to understand parts of yourself which you are extremely uncomfortable with. And one of the problems that always comes up with Jung and people who are Jungians are the words masculine and feminine, right? Because they're not meant as gender categories, they're meant as archetypal qualities we all carry. And so if we can talk about these, and I know words will trip people up so badly, it's crazy, but if we can take these ideas, these archetypal principles and see, oh, okay, those qualities of being and doing, which are another way of saying feminine and masculine, are actually in everybody. We can stop projecting them onto people and then castigating them for exhibiting those principles in ways that maybe you don't agree with. So this is where I think the value of the kind of work that he does with his analysis and that we can all do, just to start sensing in the body. And I really go back to the body because of all the body work I've done. Why am I uncomfortable with this? And usually it's linked to something that goes way back into the past, right?
Oh, 100%. 100%. That's been one of the real benefits of Hollis is that I now spend a lot more time thinking about why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling and not necessarily accepting the first knee-jerk reaction. Oh, that makes me very sad, or that makes me very angry. Yes, there's that on the surface, but then I will spend time saying, hold on, what's going on here, right? I will give you an example of that.
Okay.
I am the primary caregiver for my 90-year-old mother who lives in a retirement home. And I go see her on Sundays. Anyway, she usually gives me a grocery list. She wants this with this. I get the groceries before I go see her. Then I take her out for lunch. This past Sunday, she wanted a salad from Subway. Perhaps too much information, but she wanted a salad from Subway. I went to Subway. They didn't have the bowls. And I thought, so they couldn't do the salad. So, and I thought, she's going to be upset when I get back because she's 90 years old and things like small. So anyways, I got there and sure enough, oh no, you didn't get the salad? And I blew up. Mom, it's only a salad. And I got angry and told her she was being like a child. 20 years ago, that might have turned into me storming out or my mother and I not talking to each other for 2 days or whatever.
Yeah.
Instead, now, and I credit a lot of my understanding and reading of Hollis is in the next 3-4 minutes, I went, okay, what's going on here, Jeff? Yeah. What's going on is that there is a primal feeling that you have disappointed her, that feeling that you don't do enough for your mother, that you have let her down, that I never want to let my parents down. I never want to be a failure. So you're actually blowing this out of proportion as well, Jeff. You don't. And so I was able, and this, I would argue this may not have happened before Hollis. I was able 5 minutes after the blow up to sit down with her and say, I apologize, Mom. Mm-hmm. I just overreacted. I love you. And I think I was dealing with my own stuff and it's not stuff that I needed to. That is a life of meaning.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. You're totally right. That's a great
example. Not to pat myself on the back.
No, that's a great example.
But that could have turned into, when I was 35 years old, I might have stormed out and said, I'll talk to you tomorrow, or I'll talk to you in 2 days.
Yeah. Yeah. That is
Instead,
exactly.
I went, hold on, take responsibility.
That's such a good example. Thank you for bringing it up. And it's funny, somebody just sent me a message on Instagram saying she'd listened to me say, and this is where it's dangerous when you're doing podcasting because you say things and you forget to add the context. I had said at some point, anger is not constructive, but I meant it in the context of anger not being constructive if you are blaming people in an angry way for something you should own, right? But actually anger, the way you just said it, is very constructive, because if you sit with it, it shows you, oh, okay, what is this really about? And it's about a whole bunch of other things that have nothing to do with a salad. And that is the kind of process that people don't make. You know, I do a lot of posting also with people like Pema Chodron and people in the kind of the mindfulness area. And one thing they always say is, look, you're never going to get to the point where you're not going to get angry at that scenario, but you are going to get to the point where there's a gap. And in that gap, sometimes you won't react, you just take the breath. That's hard. But if you do react, it will give you the consciousness to sit with it and say, okay, what is this really about? And when you start having that question, I'm sure you felt this, there's like this weight just leaves you, and this compassion rises for yourself, for the other person, and love too. That's where love really is. It's not in the way it's depicted usually. It is in those moments where your humanity comes out and you remember what the story is about. And one of the questions I think Hollis repeats in his 38 books he's published by now, it's crazy, right? Is it's never what you think it is about. And that is, you just demonstrated that with the perfect example, right?
That is an important point. It is that it is always worth it to spend some time thinking about what's going on. Right. What else is going on here other than I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm happy. What else is going on here? And it sounds like it's a lot of work. Well, I don't want to spend that much time thinking about it, but it's actually a life of meaning. I mean, it sounds, but that's what gives meaning to life. And every time you do that, you understand a little bit more. Now, there's always more questions. There's always more stuff to learn into that. But it's a richer moment.
I look at it like a puzzle that you're putting together of yourself, of your inner world, which, by the way,
and you're never going to finish it. You're never going to finish it. Bea.
Okay, that's so important, by the way, Jeff, but I don't want it to finish it, because finishing means death. The point is, we're all evolving. The word is loaded. We're all unfolding, shall we say, parts of ourselves that have been in the dark. And they're actually really full of a lot of creative potential. You're a creative, you know this. The creativity comes from the unconscious, according to Eric Neumann, but also my own experience of when I'm facing the page. I'm trying to discover what the heck is going on in my mind, which is why I always tell people, write something, because it is how you discover what is really going on. And so for me, every time I go through that process, I'm uncovering a part that has been in the shadow and I've rejected because it scared me, or because I felt it's a lot easier being unconscious, frankly, and not taking the responsibility. But once you do it, it is, like something has totally opened up. Jung tells the story, already being in his 80s. He died, I think, at the age of 84 or 85. And he had gotten angry at 84. This is a man who'd done all the inner work and whatever, and got angry over some minor thing to the person who was cleaning his house. And the way he approached it, I thought was brilliant. It was like, oh, first of all, apologize, of course. And then goes, oh, that's a part of me that I still haven't addressed. It's the idea that every time you're meeting yourself in that guise, then you can explore it, but it will never end, right? I call this the unresolved chord. There are parts of ourselves that are particularly difficult to resolve, if there's any resolution to be had. And they're probably your biggest learning parts. For some people, it's their relationships to one person, or it's their familial background. It could be anything, right? But that unresolved chord will resolve temporarily for a little bit and then come in a new guise. You know how you think you figured out something and then it walks in the door with a different name?
Bea, let me tell you this right now. One of the things that I do get snobby about, because I can be a bit of a snob. It's not really warranted, but I can be, and that needs to be examined as well. The word I can't stand is closure. I need some closure. I find that so superficial and just easy. I have to tell you, Bea, I don't think I'm ever going to get closure on anything. I have to tell you that. I don't know whether you ever read Carol Shields. Carol Shields was quite a noted Canadian author who passed away a few years ago, but she wrote a book called The Stone Diaries, which was in diary form of a woman who grew up, born in 1910, Daisy Flett. And she was born in the prairies and came east. But anyway, she lives to be about 89 years old. And I just remember that book being about what's going on, the difference between the life she's leading with her spouse, her children, her grandchildren, that grandmother thing she does with everybody, and what's going on inside her. And that And she has this list that she writes near the end of the book that no one will ever read. Actually, perhaps after she dies, her grandchildren or her children will read it, about all of the things she's never done, all the things she wished she had done, all of and at some point, and I'm paraphrasing, I shouldn't paraphrase Claire Shields, but at some point, she says in the book, as she lies dying, I am not at peace. And of course, that's not the image we have of our lovely, sweet 89-year-old grandmother who's lying in the hospital with that beatific expression on her face. And I'm holding her hand, and you know that she has no regrets. You know, she lived a good life. It was a hard life. And instead, what she is thinking brilliantly, I am not at peace. No. And I think that is critical.
Yeah.
You know what, Bea? I will never be at peace, honey. I will never be at peace.
And I agree. I don't think I will be. No, because I think being at peace or closure, what you're saying, implies an end to something. And one of the words associated with the feminine, by the way, is process. That you're always in process, you're in movement, right? And I think the idea that something ends in a harsh way and that you have this great realization, that's not going to happen. I think that's why people chase certain experiences, maybe certain books. I know I have in the past, so I'm not free from that desire that somehow I'm going to pick up, because I'm a book hog, somehow I'll pick up that book that answers all the questions. And that's not there. I think that's what drives people to a certain fundamentalist standpoint, which Hollis really warns
Please
people.
give me a system of belief that has all the answers. Yeah. Please lay it out, and so that I know if I do this and this will happen, right? Yeah. I believe that that's absolutely true. And it's often why people are drawn to something that is prescriptive and is very intricately detailed as far as process and the way that I find that very interesting. Because we do want to find the answer. Give me the answer. Give me the answer that's going to make my life what I think it should be, which is happy. I just want to be happy all the time.
Yeah. I just want to be drugged, unconscious. Just give me another TV show, whatever it is that you're used. Everybody uses something
Another
different.
boyfriend.
Yeah. Did you read The Eden Project by him? The one that I recommend probably most often because it's his
book. Oh, about relationships.
Yes, relationships.
Oh,
because
please.
Well, that's how I started my Sophia group, by the way, years ago. And I remember distinctly one of the members at the time wanting to throw the book across the door because he's not going to give you any anodyne answer to what romantic love is. These are projections. The imagery starts off with, if you remember, that cardinal hitting the window over and over again, trying to find its mate and just seeing its own reflection. It's just brilliant, right? The idea that what you're always finding is your own reflection, which is why I'm always worried about people that put people on pedestals. When it crashes, it's going to be very hard to pick the pieces up.
There's a play called Rum and Vodka by an Irish playwright named Conor McPherson about this late 20s, early 30s. It's a monologue about this young person who is married a couple of years and his wife is pregnant, but he cheats on her. And he goes and he drinks too much and he goes to the bar one night and he gets drunk again while his wife is at home pregnant, worried about this impending birth, and he knows he's screwing up. He gets drunk and he approaches a woman and she smiles at him and he smiles at her and he looks at her and says, "Cure my life." And I always remembered that because I think that's what I have looked for every time I have been involved with another person, man. I wasn't as overt as that, but in my mind, I want you to cure my life. Yeah. So all the things that are missing, all the feelings of deficiency and not being good enough, I need you to fill those spaces. Yeah. I'm not going to say that out loud. And that's what's brilliant about McPherson is that he has this drunk say it out loud. But that's what I'm thinking. And then what happens is we have this lustful relationship for 5-6 months, which is built on lust. And then when we come out of that and that excitement, I need you to start really working at filling in these empty spots, and you're not doing it. So there's something wrong here, and it's you who's wrong. It's not me, because I know the parts you need to fill in me. I know how you need to help me, and you're not doing it. I have an issue with that, right?
He's brilliant at exploring that. And actually in that book, which I've often recommended, I love all the books published here in Toronto, his first books with Inner City books, they're all brilliant, is just how to take back those projections so you can have a real relationship, because it's only when two people meet as they are and not what they're projecting. And there's always going to be some projection, but when you can meet the person as they are, not who you think you need, as you say, to fill in those spaces we all have. It's just human nature. Then you
I
can
would
have,
say that's enormously difficult, Bea. Enormously
course.
difficult. It's like one of those things that you can read and go, oh yeah, but then the reality of meeting a new person and getting to know that person, it's pretty inevitable that that projection starts almost from that first, actually before you've even said a word, when you first see the person across the way, you start to think about who this person could be to you. And it's fascinating. Listen, this is not the right podcast to talk to somebody about the beauty of romance and relationships. We know what we learned from our parents, right? Absolutely. And I don't want to go into too much detail, but I have reason to be pretty cynical about why people get together and why they choose to stay together. And yes, that has shaped me in immeasurable ways throughout my life, including not only when I'm on my own, but when I'm involved with another person.
It's interesting about that, because if I agree, projection is always going to happen. In fact, by the way, Mary-Louise von Franz famously said, if you don't project, you wouldn't even know yourself at all. We need others to show us the hidden parts of ourselves. So there's nothing wrong with that. I think what he would say is what happens when, with some level of awareness, is that you start saying, okay, let's bring some back. Let's, reel some of these things back. And sometimes, by the way, the relationship won't work because fundamentally you may be incompatible in other ways. But I think if you're at least a little bit aware, then you can see, I don't know if it's happened to you, but you can see the projection, go, oh, okay, I see what I'm doing, but you will still be driven to do it. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, right? I think that is part of how we learn who we are. So relationship is the biggest vehicle, really, if you think about it, of finding out the parts of ourselves that are unknown to us. But yes, if you keep those projections on and you're not aware, at least admit to yourself, oh, this is what's happening. And I think where you can have better relationships is when you just said what you did. You analyzed your familial patterns, you saw how they worked out, and oh, okay, this is what may be driving me, because we're all looking to recreate the patterns. I said in the last episode with Sumit, the line that Hollis repeats, we seek the teeth to match our wounds. That's a pretty interview.
I don't remember that.
That's such a great line. We seek the teeth to match our wounds. And I think that's true, that in a way we're trying to work out the initial kind of wounding through the vehicle of a relationship. And yeah, that may not work out, but it's necessary. You don't avoid them. I think it's worse when you avoid them. I certainly did that for many years.
I have to counter your terminology there when you say it may not work out, because I feel that reinforces the idea that in a relationship, if you are not with that person for the rest of your life, it didn't work out. You remember, John, we were together 6 years. We lived in Boston. We spent time in Ireland. We lived in Toronto. We did all of these amazing things. And at the end of 6 years, he decided that was the end of the relationship, and for a number of reasons, and it ended. Now, I was devastated, and that's all worth looking at. However, I remember somebody saying to me soon after that, and he was a friend of mine, he said, "Oh, Jeff, I'm so sorry that didn't work out." And I remember just immediately going, hold on. Yeah, it worked out for 6 years. What are you talking about? I do not buy this whole idea that unless you find that person that you are monogamous with for the rest of your life, sorry, you just didn't quite.
No, I'm glad you. Yeah, you're totally right. I totally 100% agree with you, by the way. The biggest thing that I think Hollis addresses, and people that are writing in that area, is that whole myth of romantic love, the happily ever after. It is crazy. You can be learning through different people. You can also learn with the same person, because you change. As the years go by, you become a different person yourself, and they become a different person, and the dynamic between the two of you changes as well. There's no one thing, but the idea that I think this is one of the most pernicious things he addresses, the happily ever after myth, and that something is basically a failure if it didn't last till death for both of you. It's insane. And it actually makes go ahead.
Sorry, you just, when you're talking about happily ever after, you and I both love literature.
Yes.
And I don't know whether you ever read Donna Tartt, The Goldfinch.
I did. I've read The Secret History of the Goldfinch. Yeah.
But anyways, at the end of it, This is just done on the happily ever after. She writes, this is the character, this young man who has lived this incredible, adventurous, torturous, traumatic life. And he says at the end, and increasingly, I find myself fixing on that refusal to pull back because I don't care what anyone says or how often or winningly they say it. No one will ever be able to persuade me that life is some awesome, rewarding treat. Because here's the truth. Life is catastrophe. The basic fact of existence, of walking around trying to feed ourselves and find friends and whatever else we do, is catastrophe. Forget all this ridiculous R-town nonsense everyone talks. The miracle of a newborn babe, the joy of one simple blossom, life you are too wonderful to grasp, etc. For me, and I'll keep repeating it doggedly until I die, till I fall over on my ungrateful, nihilistic face, and I'm too weak to say it. Better never born than born into this cesspool. And I just think that's the end of the book. And I just think it's so brilliant because, of course, yes, it's dark and yes, things, but he's lived this magnificent life, Bea. And he's only 27 when he talks this, when he's talking about this. But I love the idea, Bea, that life is catastrophe. I love that image because I'm speaking for myself. It is. It is a catastrophe. What do you mean, Jeff? No, I mean, it is a glorious, beautiful, ridiculous, phenomenal catastrophe.
I'm glad you added those adjectives. If you just leave it a catastrophe, I think people will be left with it.
I just love that. I love the idea of not bemoaning or not mourning the fact that it's not like it is in the movies, that things don't have an easy answer or a simple ending or a closure.
Yes. You hate the word closure, don't you?
I do. I hate the word closure. I think of Daisy Flett at the end of Stone Diaries. I am not at peace.
No, I agree. Listen, I think that's the difference between what people see in European film and often in American film, right? You don't always get to tie up things and you don't always get the peace that you think you needed, but you might get something else. And this is where I think reflection really matters. And this is where I think literature does point us often to things in a way that no amount of telling in a nonfiction way can do, which is that sometimes just in the process of examining what's happened and what you're responding to, it kind of counters a sense of catastrophe in that, just in this way, in that you do see meaning in it. You go, oh, okay. Schopenhauer famously said that only at the end of your life will you see that your life has been like a novel written in many parts, but that it made sense somehow, that all the things were lining up in such a way. But to understand that, you've had to actually read the novel of your life, which means you've had to had some reflection, right? Some idea of what was driving. And that, by the way, that is where I find meaning. Finding what's driving me in an inner way, which is why I love writing fiction, why I love reading fiction, why I love running a dream group. By the way, examining the inner world for your dreams is one of the most powerful things because you see the lie that you're telling yourself every day. Your unconscious is revealing at night, and it is so humbling to understand that what is driving you is, again, what Hollis says, it's not what you think it is. And sometimes you gotta eat a little bit of dirt because it's a bit embarrassing, but it's there. And in the process of examination, it's so powerful, and that will give meaning to the catastrophe, right?
Absolutely. You brought up a word, and I just wonder if we could take a minute to just touch on it, and that's shadow. I know you talk a lot about it in all of what you discuss with people and on your podcast, but what is your understanding? And this shadow is obviously central to Jung and central to Hollis's writing, but what is it that you understand about that particular word?
To me, it's all that I do not know about myself, all that is hidden from me until I do the conscious work to unearth it, okay? And there are a lot of things that are in the shadow societally. We know, we keep things hidden. In the 19th century, it was sexuality, which is why we needed Freud, why we needed people to come out and say, hey, this repression is causing real damage. Whatever we repress will show up in ways that are often unhealthy. So to me, the way I look at it is all that I don't see, that maybe you're saying when you talk to me, you go, hey, Bea isn't quite aware that she's really whatever, right? But for me, it is so painful sometimes to accept that I will keep it in the dark. But the one thing that Jungians have taught me is that what you're keeping in the dark, which is shameful, and by the way, I come from a culture, I was raised by people from a culture that shame is very big in Mediterranean culture, right? That if you're able to bring it into the light, has creative potential that goes beyond anything. And that's why they talk about the golden shadow. So I think there's this misapprehension that a shadow is necessarily bad or evil. It's not. It's just what you can't maybe accept about yourself or can't see about yourself. And then that's where your dream work, or even what you're talking about. Why are you responding to these writers that you are quoting? Someone else may not, but you're speaking to in a certain way, partially because they have allowed you to retrieve something that perhaps could not be retrieved in any other way, which is, by the way, you as an actor on stage will help us do that. A writer will help us do that through their work. So Hollis would do it through his work, right? That's why he continues writing. That's the way I understand it. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. That's the way I understand it as well. I often think about, and I believe he writes this at some point in one of his books, that which I am not comfortable with in myself. And I think you're right. It's very often stuff that I'm not necessarily aware of, or I don't want to think about, or I haven't thought about. But then when it does surface, I don't want to talk about that. No, yeah, no, I don't know. It's always fascinating when somebody, including myself, and I'm in a conversation, and I say, or somebody else will say, no, I'm not in, I don't know, no, change the subject. I don't want to talk about that. Yeah. Of course. What more do you want to talk about except that now? Like, of course. Like, let's explore, right? Because I do think what I love about the idea of that which I'm not comfortable with, because I do think, and I'm an actor and I love literature and I love playing characters who are not comfortable. Yeah. I just think it's such an interesting state to be. I can be comfortable in a classroom. I can often be comfortable on a stage. But where it gets really interesting for me is when I'm unsure, when I'm uncomfortable, when I'm nervous, right? When I'm not sure of what I'm doing. And of course, that is a state I'm in probably 75% of the day.
Well, that's good, though. That's good. It's a point of inquiry. If you look at it as a point of investigation or inquiry about yourself, you can, divorce yourself from the feeling of shame or discomfort and actually look at it as, this is showing me something I need to know about myself. Now, do you want to look in that mirror? I think that's hard, because sometimes if
it's
you feel
hard.
shame,
it is hard.
Yeah, it is. I'm not saying, no, none of this is easy. But honestly, it makes life a lot more interesting. I don't know about you, but as I've gotten older, the inner world has become so much more interesting to me than the outer world. The outer world seems like a poor shadow of what I can contact through symbol. And this is why I love reading myths, and I love reading things that take me to that inner world. And the outer world's always trying to seduce you with things and gadgets and experiences. But what Jung noted, he said, look, and this is why you probably found Hollis and he resonated in midlife. The midlife journey is about turning inwards, right? Getting away from what you've built as ego construct, whatever it is you've built. He wrote an essay that I recommend everybody read called The Stages of Life, where he talks about this, which he uses the metaphor of the sun rising, reaching noon at around midlife, and then the descent happens. And there is nothing, and Hollis says this, and it's so true, there is nothing as unpleasant as an older person who is unhappy and grumpy because they don't want to greet death. And so the second half of the journey is about becoming comfortable with the fact that you're dying and you're going to die, and that the meaning is made by being present to whatever shows up. And part of it is, and I do like the idea of your life being like a novel that you're unfolding, to have the reflective part of you say, okay, what is this journey about? What is this journey really about? And what has it been about? Without then stewing and staying there, and just with a very open curiosity, open-mindedness. I don't think that's done. It's not encouraged in the culture at all. There's just not a space for it. So I think he gives you the space, and that's why I find him extremely valuable.
Yeah, and I should also know, in case I'm coming off in this dialogue as sounding as somebody who read Hollis and then started to figure things out, and now and lived a life of valor and wonder and experience, and no, I struggle every single day. Yeah. I struggle every single day, and I have for every single day since I first read Hollis. And struggle meaning to figure it out, to find a path, to understand, to do the right thing, to do the next right thing, to be helpful, to think of someone other than myself. All of those things. It's an ongoing, sometimes torturous, sometimes quite joyful process, right? But in case anyone believes somehow the way I'm talking that somehow I figured anything out. I haven't. And that's sort of why I'm always going back to literature. I'm always going back to fiction, and because I don't understand. I don't get it. I still don't know what the heck is going on. But I will read a passage in a novel. I will read a piece of writing, and I will go, oh, of course of course. It may challenge me. It may reinforce something I already know. But oh my gosh, Bea. And this is why I love Hollis. Another reason I love Hollis. And one of the reasons I took to him immediately is because he fills his books with literature, with poetry, with art. And his books are not focused on, but that certainly fills. When he wants to make a point, he uses a quote from an artist, from an author, from a composer, whatever it is, that I immediately took to, because that's what I do. I unfortunately was not born, not unfortunately, it's neutral. I was not born into a family that had a system of belief, a faith system. I remember asking my mom when I was 13 what religion we are, and she said, ask your father. And my father didn't know. So I think I took to literature and reading so vigorously because I was looking for meaning, looking for reasons behind what I was seeing on the surface. And that's what I love about, one of the things I love about Hollis's writing is that he is always using literature to reinforce, to illustrate a point. And that just turns me on to no end. And he never stops. If every book you read, he does the same thing, often using the same quotes, but it's just so rich.
Yeah, it is rich. That is my experience of Hollis as well. And that is a tribute to his background as an English prof. It is really helpful in that regard. Thank you so much for this, Jeff. I'm going to have you back on because there's so many things that came out of this conversation that I would like to pursue if you're interested in doing so.
Oh my gosh,
having regular
of course.
conversations, that would be great.
On this particular subject, we could go.
I know. That's what
I hate to say we haven't scratched the surface.
I know. You could never with this subject, by the way, you could be doing a million podcasts and it's still there, which is what keeps me going. I find life really fascinating. I read most of the day. People always say to me, watch this film. Or I don't think the attention span for anything but books lately. It may change. But yeah, I find it endlessly fascinating. But I also find the process we talked about, the inquiry, self-inquiry, extremely fascinating and really important as well.
You are a voracious reader, lover of literature. I love literature too. I love theater. I still go to the theater all the time. I see answers. And let me just end with, because I think we both can relate, John Irving's quote, or one piece of writing from the end of Hotel New Hampshire, when he said, you've got to get obsessed and stay obsessed. And I think of that all the time. And I am so grateful that I remain obsessed about literature, about theater, about art, obsessed. And there are days that reading has saved my life over and over again. And I know one of the things I've always loved about you, Bae, was it was clear at 17 years old that you were obsessed. And I can see now, having reconnected, that obsession remains. And I believe Irving was right when he said, you've got to get obsessed and stay obsessed. And I hope this is my state until the day I say goodbye.
You've always been very good at finding the right passage, and I will remind you that you gave the toast to the bride at my wedding. And that no, I need to say this because it was beautiful. You ended it by quoting the last paragraph of a book I really love by one of my favorite authors, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Love in the Time of the Cholera. It was one of the most beautiful ways to end a speech, and I still remember that, just hearing it, because my first novel had just been accepted for publication, and you read that
so exciting
paragraph, knowing how to find the exact paragraph that resonated not only with the event, but with the way I saw life, my love of literature, and my love of this particular writer. It was perfect. That's what you do so well.
Bea, just one thing before we sign off. This is something I ask some people, often around a dinner table, but today, if you were to have it ready to write, to have it ready to publish, but you still hadn't come up with a title for your autobiography today, not about in the future of the past, but a title for your autobiography, what might that title be? Just
so
whatever
what came to me immediately, still learning. That's the two words that come up.
I love it. I love it.
That's
I
it.
love it.
That's it. That's all I can come up with.
Still learning. Mine that I've decided on, I've said too much. So let me say, that's the time I've said too much.
And anybody who
knows me, just how appropriate that title is.
I think, I think.
I hope I haven't said too much today.
No, you haven't. You've said just the right amount of words. Just the right amount of words. Until next time, though, Jeff.
Okay. Thanks so much, Bea. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. If you would like to know more about the Sophia Psycho projects or the work I do, please go to sophiapsychos.com. Until next time.